Hey everyone, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Brand Power Analysis. Today I have on
Mike Dotterer.
Yeah, tell everyone who you
are.
Mike
Dotterer.
Yeah, tell everyone who you
Zach,
are.
It's an honor to be on.
Zach,
your podcast.
It's an honor to be
on. Again, my name is Mike Dotterer. Again, my name is Mike Dotterer. I have a show called On the Dot, and my background is when I was a little kid, my father was a Major League Baseball player, and my dream was to be left field, to play left field in Yankee Stadium, and I was drafted out of high school by the New York Yankees, and Mr. Steinbrenner gave me a nice offer. This was back in 1979. I actually was drafted ahead of Don Mattingly, who was a pretty good baseball player, and we would have been teammates in the minor leagues. But my father said, Michael, I was a major league player, and I think you should go to college. So I took my father's advice, and I accepted a scholarship at Stanford University and was able to play baseball and American football. And I was very lucky to play with one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, John Elway. We were teammates. And it was also, it was an exciting 4 years. We ended our career at Stanford with the famous play with our Stanford band coming on the field. So, that was an interest. Obviously we were not happy about it, but looking back 40 years ago, I think ESPN ranked it as the number 2 behind the Miracle on Ice with our USA hockey team beat the Russians. That was the number 1 biggest event in ESPN history. Well, number 2 was the Stanford band coming on the field. So that was a fun way to, again, at the time we didn't think it was, but it was memorable. That was 40 years ago. I was drafted again by the Yankees, and I had an opportunity. I was drafted in the National Football League by the then called the Los Angeles Raiders.
Yeah.
And I tell people that Mr. Al Davis, gave me more money than Mr. Steinbrenner. So I signed with the Raiders, and I was very fortunate. As they say in life, timing is everything. In my rookie year, we won the Super Bowl. And so I was lucky to get one of these Super Bowl rings. And thanks to my teammate, Marcus Allen, he was the MVP of the game. And but I also got hurt. I tore my anterior cruciate that year, and it was frustrating at the time because I thought I was going to play left field in Yankee Stadium. Here I am playing American football, but hey, didn't have to go through the minor leagues. In my rookie year, we won the Super Bowl, so that was fun. I took the money that I made from football, and I immediately began my matriculation at Columbia University in New York City for my graduate school degree. I studied at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia. Had an opportunity to work at the United Nations after I got out of football. Went overseas and studied at the London School of Economics. And at age 30, my wife at the time, because I'm no longer married, but my wife at the time said, Michael, it's time for you to get a real job. So we were living in London, England, and I applied to a couple jobs and ended up working with a guy named Craig McCaw, who's very famous. He was these cell phones, as you can see. McCaw Cellular is now AT&T Wireless. So Craig was very successful, and that was a great first job that I had at the age of 30. And since that time, Zach, I've done a lot of different things. And I've had a very entrepreneurial experience. I've worked for major corporations. I've had my own business. I love what's going on in the world of social retail, social marketing. I'm very active in politics because that's what I studied in college, was public policy. So I truly believe that all of us need to vote and stay active. And, that's important because what happens in Washington does affect all of us. So, no matter what party you are, get involved, because if we don't get involved, then we end up with not probably the best leadership that we need. So there's where I'm at. I'm honored to be on this show, and I'm really excited to be working with you, Zach. I know you do some great work with a lot of the athletes around the world, and just excited to be part of your team.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate for jumping on. let's step back a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about, especially back then. It's probably a little bit different now with social media and all that stuff going on right now, but it probably was just as difficult back then is your transition. Like when you went from being a professional athlete and you said you went back to college, like tell us a little bit about that transition and what you went through during that time.
It was very difficult. I remember, we were in Tampa, Florida, and we just beat the Washington Redskins. And a lot of the players were getting back on the plane, heading back to Los Angeles for the parade. And I remember getting on I was supposed to get on the bus to take the plane. And I told my running back coach, his name was Ray Wilsey. And he's Coach Wilsey and I, we were both born in Saskatchewan. So it was kind of interesting. And when I was a little kid living near Berkeley, California, Coach Wilsey was the head coach at the University of California, Berkeley in the 60s. And they say that Coach Wilsey actually single-handedly saved American football at Cal, because during the 60s, it was the Vietnam War era, and a lot of the students were not interested in American football. So anyway, he was my running back coach with the Raiders. And I'll never forget, he said, okay, get on the bus, Mike. And I said, well, Coach, no, I'm not going to get on the bus. I'm getting on another plane to fly to New York City to begin my matriculation at Columbia University. And I remember him looking at me, and he had a clipboard. And I think when I said that, he looked and he got my name, and I think he drew a line through, well, Mike's done. He's no longer, he's got his mind in something else. So I went to training camp the next year, and actually after the second preseason game, Coach Flores called me into his office and said, Mike, we're going to put you on waivers. We really like your talent, blah, blah, blah. But, back then I tore my anterior cruciate ligament. And as a running back, back then they actually thought I could still play. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think I played in 2 preseason games without an anterior cruciate ligament in my knee. So
it's crazy. It's crazy how many injuries and that's a whole different story, but how many injuries players actually play through when all the fans really hear is, oh, this person got turf toe or something like that. And it's like they're out for 2 games, and then they get all upset, but then they don't realize that there's so many different injuries out there that athletes actually play through.
Yeah. Yeah. And back then, I remember in training camp, my second training camp with the Raiders, because I had to change my running style. If you don't have an anterior cruciate, when you stop, the knee goes forward. And so I had to change my whole running style. And I remember it caused me to have terrible back pains. And I actually needed to take muscle relaxers. And those muscle relaxers are now called opioids. And I was, in order to practice, I needed to have a couple muscle relaxers to go practice. So it was a blessing, actually, that I got put on waivers. And had I, and I'm just going to say, because I wasn't a Marcus Allen, I actually kind of took some shots to the head, probably more so. Even though Marcus took some shots, Marcus was a phenomenal athlete. I think had I had a long career, I might not be on this podcast with you.
Yeah.
So I had a short career. As they say, NFL stands for not for long. For most of us, I think the average lifespan of an NFL player is about 3 years. And to answer your question, it was very traumatic for me because I thought I was a better baseball player. I was a 2-time All-American baseball player in college, went to the College World Series. And here I am, professional football player, and I get hurt, and my career is very short. And yes, it was very traumatic. And I denied it. I mean, I remember back then, I never wore this ring. I put the ring in the safe deposit box and didn't want to talk about football for a decade. I didn't want to talk about anything. I just wanted to put sports out of my brain. And I didn't realize that I really missed it. I really missed playing and probably missed playing in left field at Yankee Stadium. So, but you know what? I was able to overcome it. It just, I probably had depression for maybe a decade or two. So now at age 61, I'm able to look back and say, hey, I'm still here. The sun came up this morning. I'm very grateful. And it's just great to be on this podcast with you. So thank you. Thank you, Zach.
What do you feel like helped you? What were some of the challenges that you said you had, depression, which of course anyone who has depression should go, I'm not a doctor, but go get looked at for it if you feel like you have depression. But what are some of the challenges that you felt, the challenges, how did you overcome those? Like, how did college, how did you go moving to that next step? How did you overcome that feeling, that lost sense of purpose? How did you get past that and overcome that?
Well, I would say I'm grateful to Stanford University because I was able to meet a lot of amazing people and I was able to keep those connections. And I participated in the Stanford Alumni Association. So the friendships that I built and the kind of the intellectual stimulation kept me going. And I was able to put sports aside and get involved in other things, even though I'm sure I still, was probably suffering subconsciously, but I just got involved in other things. And so it was staying busy. And then I married a wonderful woman who I'd like to send this to her because her name's Michelle. And she put up with me for 16 years. And she was, she helped me through some of the trauma that I had. I encourage everyone to watch the movie Concussion, starring Will Smith. He should have gotten an Academy Award for that. It is a serious issue. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, exists, and it's not just American football players. Anybody that has traumatic brain injury can have CTE. And the symptoms of CTE, there's 3 symptoms. It's memory loss. So Zach, if I ever call you Mac, if I forget the Z and I call you Mac, don't take it personal.
If you add the E in my last name, I'll forgive you.
Mac, okay. But so memory loss is a symptom. Second, this symptom would be depression. And most American football players, you would never know it because in order to play American football, you can't play you can't play the game if you're, oh, this hurts and that hurts. You have to play through pain. I never forget when I was with the Raiders, Greg Pruitt was one of the great running backs of all time, went to Oklahoma and was a great Cleveland Brown and was our punt returner and helped us win the Super Bowl. And Greg, I'll never forget meeting Prue. We called him Prue, Pruitt. And he said, hey, Mike, just want to let you know, you'll never be 100% with our game. You'll always play. You're always going to have pain. So you're not going to hear a football player saying, "Oh, I'm suffering from depression," or back then, definitely you wouldn't want to say anything. You just cover it up. And it's good to hear the players today are saying, "Hey, it's okay to say I'm depressed," because then you can, once you admit it, then you can seek treatment in ways, and we'll get to how you can mitigate the symptoms. And then the third symptom that I've learned through studying at Boston University, they have a Center for Traumatic Injury. They are traumatic brain injury. That's where, and I'm one of them. The NFL alumni, when you die, you can send your brain to Boston University, and they do the autopsy on your brain, and they are able to determine if you have CTE. And unfortunately, it's still post-mortem, so you don't know officially if you have CTE, even though you can look at the behaviors. Again, depression, memory loss. And then the third is, and this is something that when you see someone get really upset and lose emotional control, you need to first say to yourself, maybe they've had traumatic brain injury. They might be a soldier who's come home and had IUD explosions. And that they lose. It's called loss of emotional control. That's a symptom. So those are the three symptoms: memory loss, depression, and loss of emotional control. That's the bad news. The good news, and we've discovered this, a woman professor from UC Berkeley, at the University of California, Marion Diamond. She taught anatomy and was a famous neuroscientist, and she was one of the the leading researchers in what they call neuroplasticity, where the brain can move. You can move your brain. It's not static. And so she said that there's 4 things you can do to mitigate those symptoms. And the 4 things, number 1 is nutrition. Nutrition is critical to your brain health. So what you put in your body, you are what you eat, and it affects your brain. So that mitigates the symptoms. Second is, what am I doing right now? I'm standing, and motion is medicine. I'm moving. You do not want to live a sedentary life. And this is for everybody, but even more so for those that have traumatic brain injury. You do not want to sit too long. You want to keep moving. Motion is medicine, exercise. That impacts the brain, mitigates the symptoms. Third thing, this is very interesting. You want to find what your bliss is. If you love to fish, if you love to play tennis or chess, or if you love to talk like me, do what you love to do, because that will mitigate the symptoms. If you're in a job or profession or some avocation that you are miserable, if you have traumatic brain injury or CTE, you're in trouble. And I would say, I just talked to a friend of mine who was good friends with Junior Seau. Junior Seau, unfortunately, was not doing what he loved to do before he committed suicide. Junior Seau was managing restaurants and trying to take care of his 200-member Samoan family. If Bill Belichick had taken Junior Seau under his arm at the New England Patriots, because that was the last team he played for, and said, "Hey, Junior, you're one of the greatest linebackers of all time. You're going to stay here, and you're going to be my right-hand guy. You're going to be right here. You have a job for life." I think Junior Seau would be alive today. So that's the third thing. Find something you love to do. If you don't, you're in real trouble. And there's a segment in the movie Concussion that you'll see that theme. And then the final, and this is hard to quantify, Zach, but I'll give you a hint. It begins with L and ends with an E.
I have no idea. Love. There you go.
If you surround yourself with a partner that loves you, family that loves you, a loving environment, that mitigates those symptoms. So those 4 things. So it's not end of the world. If you have CT, you can have ways to deal with it. And that's what I'm trying to do. I love what I'm doing. I try to move as much as I can. The nutrition, I have the best nutrition. There's no doubt about it. I got the best nutrition. And if anyone out there wants to connect with me, Zach's got my information. I can share with you my secret to health. And then the 4th is the love. And I'm very fortunate. I'm here with all my relatives. I have lots of relatives here in upstate New York, and I'm surrounded by lots of love from them. So there you go.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah. I mean, it's not just the concussion thing. I think I'm going back on what you mentioned about food in general. And I mean, I don't talk about this much because it's kind of personal, but my wife has MS, and we went through a stage when she got MS where, she had to take a lot of medication. She had to do all that stuff. And, I'm a very healthy guy. And so we kind of put her much more on a healthy diet. And my wife was never I eat too much. She was always more of I get stressed, I don't eat. So whenever she would eat bad because she would just not eat all day. And so, with that said, she started eating healthy. We started getting her on a routine. And I think that, funny enough, the cysts in her brains actually went down, and the doctors were shocked. And the only thing we changed was her diet, and so it's interesting. And you say that because I think it comes back to, and we can go very much in depth on love and nutrition and all that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's the somewhat a placebo effect of, they always say there's plenty of specials out there to watch this, but the natural grit and perseverance of I'm going to heal, I'm going to get better, and I'm going to take care of my well-being heals a lot. And I think that nutrition is just part of that, and fortunately for us, nutrition, and I deal with it every day, with what I feel, having 2 young children, and me and my wife both happen to be full-time parents and, working full-time jobs, the business for me, but is that, not everything tends to be in your control anymore, and that's the way it is, like you said, with the NFL and with everything, that finding those things in your control. And one thing that's in your control is your nutrition. And so being able to find those things that are in your control, also mitigate the depression, mitigate the anxiety, and coming up with a routine. And one of the reasons I have this podcast to begin with is because, there's a lot of college athletes out there right now, and just trying to get back on subject a little bit, that, their main goal in life is, they go for that, hey, I want to make it to the NFL. I want to make it to the MLB. And in rationale, and you can explain me more a little bit about the positives of this in a second, but that should only be one step. That shouldn't be your main goal. That should be, just a stepping stone to your major goal. And the example I always like to use is a prospect we had in the past who loved animals, and they became a professional athlete. And they became a veterinarian. That's what they ended up doing in school before they became a professional athlete. And to help prevent, mental issues, it was much more just looking at the NFL or as the MLB as one stepping stone. Look at that as a guiding factor. And so now you could possibly open, maybe your end goal is, maybe you're helping animals in other countries. Maybe you're creating a public nonprofit to help, athletes do this. So there's so many different directions you can go with this. And so many athletes in college tend to focus, I say, a little too much on, hey, I want to become a professional athlete, and less so on, hey, how do I look at this as just part of my passion? Like you said, you have other passions in the world. How do you bring both of those passions together? And so when you went back to college, you went towards something that you really enjoy, which is politics. How did you somewhat relay the two together? And how did being an athlete help you with that guidance towards your passions outside the game?
Well, politics, someone I remember hearing politics is a contact sport. Mm-hmm. And boy, today, with the Republicans and the Democrats, boy, is it a contact sport.
Yeah, without getting too much into politics, of course.
Right. But what I will say is, my dream is to not make it my dream is that, we can all sing Kumbaya and, peace, prosperity, and love, with the Beatles, John Lennon, that great song, Imagine. That's a great song. You know what? I did want to say, when you're talking about nutrition, there's a great quotation: "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." I don't know if you've ever heard that, but and then there's another gem, a little nugget I'm going to give to the audience. Dr. Michael Colgan, Colgan. If you Google his name or DuckDuckGo his name, he is a famous I believe he's either Australian or New Zealand. And for those countries, I apologize because they're rivals. But he talks about how in the last 100 years, the nutrients that go into our food that is dissipated. It's degraded. So that's why supplementation is so important. So, there's another great quotation. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Mm-hmm. So it would be, I feel responsibility to let all those that are listening, Dr. Michael Colgan, the reason supplementation is critical. I have a young cousin here who's going to be a pretty good hockey player. And he said to me this morning, he said, I don't believe in shakes and powders. Well, he doesn't know that, he had a bagel with cream cheese this morning and a banana. And maybe 100 years ago, that banana had, more potassium than it does today. And that's what Dr. Colgan, in his research, he's written many books. So I just want to let everyone know that, because that's something that if I could leave one thing to your audience, Zach, is health, brain health, physical health. So getting back to your question, and I apologize, was I able to answer that question, or do you want to rephrase it so I can be more specific?
Yeah, rephrase it as in, what skill sets did you take away in the game that helped you persevere outside the game?
Right. Well, about 20 years ago, I was diagnosed. The doctor said, Mike, you have ADD. And I said, what's ADD? And he said, attention deficit disorder. And I said, well, gosh, I hope I live. I hope I don't perish with ADD. And he said, oh, don't worry about that. He said, the people that came over on the Mayflower, most of them had ADD. So, and I've come to learn that the pharmaceutical industry, this is just my opinion, they'll come up with something like when I was little, I was hyperactive. And thank God my parents did not give me Ritalin, because I don't think that Ritalin is good for young children. And I have been very fortunate, knock on wood. I have not taken a lot of pharmaceutical. Like if I get a headache, I take CBD oil and rub it on my temples, and my headache's gone. It's called microbe management. There's plants. There's things that for human beings for thousands of years have helped with one's health. And so, getting back to your question, what did I learn? I mentioned ADD because I get bored easily and my mind goes all over the place. So to answer your question, I've had to hyper focus. In order for me to get drafted twice by the New York Yankees and once by the Oakland A's and also by the Raiders in my youth, to do that, I had to hyper focus. I had to, that's it. I had to focus on becoming the best baseball or football player, American football player that I could become. The downside to that was, and these are some things that I'm part of an organization called the Players NIL. And the Players NIL, for your audience, NIL, a lot of people in sports still don't know. If you're involved in American football, especially college football, they all know now what NIL is, which is name, image, and likeness. Mm-hmm. But the hockey world really doesn't know about it, because I was just at a hockey tournament in Boston this weekend asking parents, you know what NIL is? They didn't know anything about NIL. So if you're the best chess player in North America, if you're the next Bobby Fischer, you need to know what NIL is. And so I know I'm getting off topic, but the Players NIL is one of those organizations that has 5 pillars. And this is something that I wish when I was younger, I had been exposed to. Number 1, financial literacy. Mm-hmm. I was myopic. How can I get base hits, and how can I score touchdowns, and how can I catch passes? How can I block? How can I bunt? That was my focus. And I was really good at some of those things. But financial literacy was not one of those things. The Players NIL, they have 5 pillars. Financial literacy is one of them. Second, philanthropy, giving back to your community. Mm-hmm. I did that, but I wasn't, I could have done better. I always think you can give back more. Third thing, tax compliance, the laws, the legal system, critical for people young. I have always struggled with that area and wish I had had a curriculum like the Players NIL. And then the ability to brand yourself. How do you brand? Because everybody has their unique DNA. Everybody has a superpower. Every person on this planet. We have over 7 billion people on the planet, Zach. Everyone has a superpower. And everyone has a certain unique genetic genome. And every person should know about their name, their image, and their likeness. So,
well, I think and this is real. We feel really strong about a lot of the stuff you're talking about right now. I mean, we're in the process right now, and back to what you said about NIL, we're in the process right now of creating. We're a branding and educational company. That's what we're really trying to focus on right now. And so, as we pivot our business, and so one thing that we're really focusing on is what aren't they teaching these college athletes, and what can we help them with? We could go in right away and go into these college athletes and say, hey, let's teach you about branding. Let's teach you about social media marketing. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to, that's not going to benefit them if we're not giving back and teaching them about mindfulness and about time management and stuff like that first. And so that's what we're doing. We're going, hey, before we even teach them about this stuff, why don't we help them? Because as of right now, through the Sports Business Journal, doing some of their research, they have found that about 40 hours a month for college athletes is spent around trying to find sponsorships, and that with NIL coming out. And to me, that's just ridiculous. That's 40 hours that what they should be focusing on is hyper focusing on what you said. What's their one unique special skill? I had a college athlete come to me a couple months ago, because we get a lot of DMs on Instagram from our YouTube channel and what we do. And he's like, hey, I really don't know what to do. I'm really trying to focus on a degree here. I'm, trying to become a professional but I'm also like really set. And I had to tell him, I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. If your end goal is you want to help and give back, you could get a business degree. You could get any sort of degree you want. Find something that you enjoy doing. You're still going to make it to the same end goal, because your micro is not going to affect your outgo, your macro. You're like, you just have to, you'll get there. And the fact that, and you see any successful person out there, what is the one commonality that they have? It's what you said. It's they pick two professions, and they mix them together, like the athlete and the veterinarian or this and that. And so if an athlete finds what is their one unique talent that's not outside the game, I try to help them find that through more of the business perspective. Like, hey, how do you find something that you can be passionate about outside the game? And that goes the same for personal branding. And I don't think a lot of, we talk to a lot of sports marketers too. And I think the sports marketing industry is kind of broken, to be honest with you. A lot of them are glorified outreach specialists, and I'm not bashing on sports marketers. Some of them may be shifting, but what I've seen is they go out and they go, hey, let's get you a $5,000 sponsorship, or, they have 100,000 followers and they're like, why do we need a strategy? They get followers. I'm like, it's not about the amount of followers. It's about, one, are they passionate about it so it doesn't cause burnout? Is it something that relates to their sponsorship? So for instance, I'm not going to tell an athlete to, I had a retired athlete come to me. His son was going into the NBA, and he's like, hey, he's getting these sponsorship opportunities from McDonald's, from this and that. I'm like, what does your son do that he really cares about? Well, he eats healthy. Well, then why would he do a sponsorship for McDonald's? Like, why? And from a business perspective, what is the one thing these businesses, if you're going into a partnership with a sponsorship, what is, at the end of the day, what is the one thing they want? More business, So you need to kind of correlate your passions with their passions. For one, it doesn't seem fake, but two, that's how you're going to get better conversion rate for the sponsor, which is what your whole goal should be is, hey, I'm trying to help this business. And so looking at it as much more of a partnership. And I'm getting a little bit off subject here, but at the end of the day, you're right. It's about kind of how do you find your two passions and how do you mix them together? And back to the conversation we were having with you going to college and you saying, hey, one thing that NFL helped me do was narrow focus. So that really helped you kind of narrow focus. Why don't you explain a little bit of after you got your degree, you said you were an entrepreneur for a while, or you may still be, like, how did that kind of push you towards that entrepreneur side?
Well, I'm going to talk about the entrepreneur side in 30 seconds, but what you were just talking about, Zach, what kept coming to mind is before you could talk about those 5 pillars.
Yeah.
And I believe all organizations that are trying to help student athletes or athletes, whatever you want to call them, or, helping anybody, emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the foundation. You mentioned mindfulness, which is part of emotional intelligence. If you don't have emotional intelligence and are mindful, which, for those that are listening, I lack that. I was completely there's another great quotation. It's a Greek aphorism, know thyself. I didn't know who Mike Dotterer was. I never had looked at myself. Introspective, looked at yourself in the mirror and say, who are you? This has just happened in the last decade.
Yeah.
So these are things that I'm hopeful. I'm an optimist. These young athletes that we're talking about, but it doesn't just have to be athletes. These young people today, all around the world, getting back, you all have a superpower. And it's knowing yourself and finding what your bliss is. Joseph Campbell, famous, look him up, Joseph Campbell. That was one of his famous quotations. Find your bliss. Find what you love to do. Because when you love to do something, it's not work. Make your vocation your vacation. Find your passion.
And before you finish that conversation, I do want to tell all the listeners out there that just because you find your passion doesn't mean you're going to it's going to be, 100% good all the time. You still have certain things that you need to do that you don't want to do.
Absolutely.
But I mean, a good example of that is, I have to do little tasks here and there in the business all the time that I'm like, but I enjoy doing the podcast, but the podcasts aren't going to give me the money, so, and I think it goes back to, that's where people are that's where individuals kind of hit that roadblock because they think that they need to find their why right away. And that's why it's good to say, hey, your end goal, like if you really think about it, what you said was priceless. The finding who you are and your why, because if you look at a lot of the successful people out there, and I'm not going to say success is about making millions of dollars because it's really not. That the ones that do really good, the ones that are successful, it doesn't mean they have millions of dollars. It could, but it's more so they didn't look at their business or their end goal on, hey, I want to make millions and millions of dollars, because what that ends up doing is that ends up putting this pressure on yourself that you're not like everyone else, when in reality, those people, they just enjoyed the journey and they knew that their why was, I want to give back, or my end goal is to eventually give back or help this, but I need money to do that, So they have a much more heartfelt way. And then that's what gives them more of that grit and perseverance to do things. I mean, I deal with prospects all the time that will come to me and they'll be like, that's too much money, or they'll try to undercut me, or they'll try to do stuff. And I'm like, unfortunately, like I tell them I can't work with them because I'm like, you know what? Like, I can just tell you're not going to be a good business owner and you're not going to make it because, that's not the mindset you need to have when it comes to creating a successful, like you said, something that helps a certain group of people. achieve something. And that this doesn't have to be in the business world. If you don't want to own a business, great. If you want to go into a career that helps and let someone else deal with all the mumbo jumbo stuff, then fine. But you don't need to feel that pressure right away. If you want to get a degree as, in politics, so to say, it can lead you in so many different directions. And like you said, with the NFL, you're glad now that you look back on it, you're glad that, it probably saved your life that you ended that way. 2 years, 3 years later, 4 years later, you look back on that and you're like, what happened was supposed to happen. It led me to where I am now.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about the path, it's a journey. Life's a journey. And the way there's a saying, you fail your way to the top. And failure, that's how you learn. And actually, it's not failure. When you fall down, that's how you learn. You don't learn when everything's going rosy. The greatest learning lessons is when there's adversity. And you mentioned, sometimes you have to do things that, that's not your passion. And I'm a big Albert Einstein fan. And Albert Einstein, obviously, his passion was physics.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when he was a young man, he had to work in a patent office. He wasn't able to just spend all his time on physics. And his time in the patent office, actually, there's I don't know the exact story, but he had a vision when he was working, and that because he needed to earn money. And that was the beginning, the vision when he was working in the patent office of his developing E = MC squared. And so for those that are listening, sometimes you have to do things to pay the mortgage or the rent or pay off your car or whatever, pay the car payment. But keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on what you love to do, because ultimately what you love to do will help other people. And when you help other people, there's I don't know if it's the law of the universe, but what comes, it's a kind of a yin yang thing. And it comes back to you. So,
and it's weird that you say the universe, and this is a whole different topic. We don't really have to get into it, but it's a lot like, sometimes, I don't really believe in it too much, but it's like what they say that we live in a simulation. Because, you look at games, for instance, people play video games all the time, and the game has a linear path on, you go here, you do A, B, C, D, or D to get to Z, for instance. You set your path to do a certain thing, and it may not seem like you're getting there, but you'll look back 5 years from now and you'll be like, wow, like this is a good example. Me talking to you, 5 years ago, I was working, 10 years ago, I was working for the Phoenix Suns. I told myself, hey, I have this passion about doing this and working with athletes and doing that in some form or another. I look back now and I'm like, look, we're talking on a podcast. Isn't that the epitome of working with athletes right there? Like, so it just goes to show you that life is somewhat like a game. You set yourself little goals and milestones, and those little paths. A good book to read is Atomic Habits. I'll throw a link in the comments when I put this up for people, but we also push it in our course too. But it's about finding those little things day to day that make you happy in what you do. And instead of trying to do all of them, say, hey, pick one and make a little change, pick another one and try to make a change. And it's a good book. It's a good read to kind of get people to help them focus on some of those habits to push forward. I was going off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, you know what? It reminds me of what Shakespeare said. All the world's a stage.
Yes.
And all the men and women, merely players, they have their exits and their entrances. And one man or woman in his time plays many parts, their acts being 7 ages. Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So it is, you're on stage, a game, just like in football, American football, you're on a gridiron and you're performing. Well, life, it's a stage. And the key too is to have fun, to enjoy the journey and to not beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important to love yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but to know that, whatever you conceive God to be, God loves you, and you need to love yourself, because if you don't love yourself and know that God loves you, or whatever your, religion philosophy is, it's going to be hard to love others.
Yeah.
So, and that's why health, putting your health first, it's so important, because you can't be a great athlete. You can't be a great mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, if you're not taking care of your health. So,
and I think a key point you took out of that, and just to tell others, is you said, don't beat yourself up over the failures or over things not getting to a certain point. I think the key there is really, don't beat yourself up if you end up beating yourself up, because I think at the end of the day, no one's perfect. Everyone's going to go through times when they have to learn, they have to grow, and they want to achieve greatness. So there's going to be a point where no matter what, it's just unprecedented that people don't, beat themselves up in some way, form, or another. But then don't get down on yourself for going, hey, I shouldn't be beating myself up. Just kind of go, hey, try to rebound, try to, in business world, it's very easy. I call it the business depressions. One day you'll be on top of the world and be like, oh, things are working, things are going great. And then you'll have another day where you're just, for some reason, depressed, and just looking at it going, all right, this is common. This is normal. I just have to know that it's going to bypass.
Well, what I've noticed is when I am not feeling good, I am not putting the nutrients my body craves. When I put the nutrients, there's a direct correlation, Zach, between nutrients and your mood. So if you're feeling down, ask yourself, are you putting the right nutrients in your body? If you're feeling sick, always get back to, what am I, putting in my body? Because there's a direct correlation. Yeah.
Well, I would love to keep going on this. I think we could chat all day, but we're kind of running out of time here. So why don't you tell everyone what you're doing now, how you can help other athletes or other individuals, and where they can find you?
Well, thank you so much, Zach. I'm very grateful to be on your show and this wonderful podcast. And you're doing so much to help athletes all over the world. And, we met through the NFL Retired Players organization. And thanks to the Retired NFL Players group, we were able to connect. So thank you for helping all of us former, NFL alumni. I'm right now, I have I can call it a podcast, even though we're not streaming yet on Apple or what's the other platform streaming?
You have Apple, and you have, I actually have it open right now, Spotify.
Thank you. I'm not yet, I hope to be, but I'm streaming live, and it's there. It's called On the Dot, and I'm on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and we do these. And I'm going to have you, Zach, come on my show called On the Dot. And again, my name is Mike Dotterer, or if you go to YouTube, you can go to Michael Dotterer, and I have a YouTube channel, and I would love to have you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I am focused on health and wellness. So I have a lot of elixirs that can help people stay away from the pharma world, which I know in some areas do good things, but we have if you just look up opioids, and a lot of people were hurt by that. And there's a lot of wonderful natural products that human beings have been taking for thousands of years, and they can help you. So I'm involved in that. And I also, I mentioned the Players NIL. I want to help young people and older people understand this name, image, and likeness. And thanks to your show, you've inspired me, because when you talk about the 5 pillars, you need to have emotional intelligence. You need to have mindfulness. That's the foundation before you can learn about financial literacy and philanthropy and tax liability and all those things that have to do with your business side. You need to have the emotional intelligence and the mindfulness to have patience. So you can reach me. My email address is Michael Dotterer @gmail.com. And I have a website. I love the name of my website because it truly is. It's back to what we talked about with, how to mitigate the symptoms. My website is on the dot, which is a period, LOVE. So it's on the dot love, not cool. .com, not .net, .love, because if we're to make our planet better and live in prosperity and peace and harmony, it starts with love. And I just want to send my love to you, Zach, and thank you so much. And send my love to all the people that are listening, and really appreciate being on your show and looking forward to having you on the dot.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you for being on another episode of the Brand Power Analysis.
Thank you, Zach.